President Trump's opposition to the so-called squad of 4 Democratic lawmakers has reached the international stage. On Thursday, Israel barred a visit from Congresswomen Rashida Tlaib of Michigan and Ilhan Omar of Minnesota after President Trump tweeted that it would show great weakness for the country to let them in. The freshman Democrats, who are both Muslim, have been vocal critics of Israel's treatment of Palestinians. They were planning to tour the Israeli-occupied West Bank during their visit. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Friday Tlaib could come in after all to visit her 90-year-old grandmother. Tlaib declined, saying the restrictions on her were too great. Natalie Andrews joins me now from Washington. She's a congressional reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Natalie, thanks very much for being with us. Tell us about the position Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in and why he would side with President Trump on this.
Good morning, or good afternoon, Elaine. Benjamin Netanyahu is possibly looking at his upcoming election where he is in a tight race, and it's seen as possibly favorable that if he comes down hard against the Tlaib and Omar, who are against movements to boycott Israel, that he could gain support. But it's a risky move because he drew a lot of criticism this week from varying members, people who had even supported him.
Well, the 2 congresswomen announced they will hold a press conference in Minnesota on Monday. How are they framing this controversy?
You know, Rashida Tlaib, who was granted access into the country on humanitarian terms, has framed it as though she doesn't want to come to the country with only a partial level of access and rights. She's a U.S. Congresswoman. She wants to be treated as such. She wants to talk this week more about not being allowed into the country, travel bans. Expect to hear a lot of that. They'll keep this conversation going.
Well, let's turn now to the debate over gun control. Democrats have called on the Senate to cut short their summer vacation, and the president has voiced support for reaching a bipartisan solution. You wrote about this recently for the Wall Street Journal. Tell us about some of the conversations that are going on behind the scenes.
So aides are talking, and that, while that sounds simple, it's actually a lot different than the reaction that the White House had in Parkland last year after that shooting. Donald Trump spoke. He had a meeting that was televised where he expressed support for background checks, but then the conversations really ended. And when I've talked to aides on the Hill and lawmakers, they say they're a little bit more optimistic, possibly skeptically optimistic, just because gun policy is so hard to do on the Hill. But they say because you have people like the White House Legislative Affairs Director behind these discussions, that there's actually some movement. Mitch McConnell is not going to bring the Senate back early, but he has said that he wants to have a debate and a discussion around this. So people are possibly cautiously optimistic that there could be some genuine debates here.
Wow, interesting to hear that. Well, the meantime, the House Judiciary Committee subpoenaed 2 former Trump associates Thursday as part of their investigation into whether the president obstructed justice in relation to Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia probe. Tell us who's being called to testify and what Democrats want from them.
Well, it's 2 names that should be familiar to people who followed the 2016 campaign, Corey Lewandowski, who was the campaign manager for a short time, and then Mr. Rich Dearborn, who was in a top official in the White House when Trump first took office. So these 2 people are quoted extensively through the Mueller report, both talked to the Mueller team and are part of it. What the Judiciary Committee wants to talk about and zero in on are 2 instances in which Donald Trump asked Mr. Lewandowski, at the time he wasn't working for the White House, but he was considered a close aide. He wants to ask about times when Mr. Trump asked Lewandowski to call Jeff Sessions and maybe intervene and ask him to publicly say the investigation was a witch hunt. There's 2 instances there where Lewandowski and Dearborn were involved, and the Democrats really see this as an attempt by Mr. Trump to obstruct the investigation, obstruct justice, and they want to talk more about it.
Finally, Natalie, we learned President Trump has expressed interest in purchasing Greenland from Denmark. Greenland officials responded saying they are not for sale. Natalie, why would the president be eyeing this?
Well, we know Donald Trump likes real estate. We know that he's come up with a real estate background. It is interesting. When my colleagues broke this news, I was surprised. I think we saw a reaction on Twitter that a lot of people were surprised that Donald Trump is talking about Greenland. But it is rich in natural resources, and some of those resources are very new because the ice is melting there, and so a lot of these natural resources are completely untapped. And so as Donald Trump has heard more and more about Greenland, I think the real estate developer in him is saying, well, is it for sale? And has brought it up with many associates.
Okay, on that note, Natalie Andrews in Washington for us. Natalie, thank you.